Good evening. You're watching or listening to Redwood Wonk. My name is Eric Kirk. I'm with David Frank. We are talking national political news of the day. And right off, we're going to talk about history being made in the House. The Speaker, Kevin McCarthy, has been ousted. They set up this goofy system where one person could make a motion to have him removed. We've been discussing the whole budget issue, and when McCarthy worked with the Democrats to get a 45-day extension sans Ukraine aid to before the government was closed. Matt Gaetz decided that he was going to make a motion. 8 Republicans voted with him. All of the Democrats voted to oust him. McCarthy had basically refused to even talk about what he would offer the Democrats. Said no, I'm not going to offer anything. You should just vote for me, period. And by the way, you're a bunch of commies, so why would I give you anything? Kind of a stuff. And so they all voted to oust him. I think nominated Jeffries again, and for the first time in history, a Speaker of the House has been ousted. McCarthy has said that he will not run for Speaker again. I'm actually going to make a prediction about something similar to that, but at the end of the show. But this is drama. To be sure, this shows the complete dysfunction of the Republican Party at this point, that they have set themselves up. Granted, it's kind of the circumstances are that it's such a close difference in the House in terms of numbers because of the way the elections have gone, that it does give these little groups more power. Obviously, they only needed 8 Republicans to do this. Already, the pettiness has started. They're kicking Nancy Pelosi out of her office, sending McCarthy into it. I mean, little stupid little things, and they want to blame the Democrats for this. But this is, as the Democrats said, this isn't our problem. This is dysfunction in your party. We're not going to rescue you from yourselves, and so we now have a situation where there have been a couple of people running to replace them. Scalise and Jim Jordan are the cases. Jordan, of course, we've talked about a lot on this show as being a particularly extreme person. I don't think he has, he's likely to, but we don't know what's going to happen over the next week, or if there's going to be more candidates, or what's going to happen. But they've got to somehow get those 8 people back in and back them. And I don't know what the new speaker is going to be able to do to stay in power. Are they going to shut the government down and ensure that the House goes to the Democrats next election? Because the way it's been framed, even in the right-wing media, pretty much everybody knows this is a Republican problem. It has nothing to do with the Democrats. So if the government gets shut down, it will probably be blamed squarely on the Republicans. So they've got a problem. Dave?
It's a problem, definitely. This is a Republican House caucus that's in disarray. And so much of it was self-inflicted wounds. I think the 30,000-foot view picture is that McCarthy, in order to get the count of votes that he needed to become speaker, just made one too many promises that he couldn't really square that circle. So he was vulnerable to charges of not leading up to his word, not living up to his word. And so he promised too many things to too many people. I think that's kind of the big takeaway. But when you look at it more closely, it was 216 to 210. It didn't have to be this way. It's actually not just a personality problem with hate between himself and his colleagues in the the Freedom Caucus folks, and the people are calling him the Rebel Caucus. They're calling him the Insurrection Caucus. They're calling him a bunch of different things. But bottom line was they were able to get for example, like you said, they were able to get the vacate rule lowered to just one person could
Mhm.
open that up. That's some kind of dysfunctional. That's why this hasn't happened before. 100 years ago, there was a threat to do this, but it didn't actually play out. But this 216 to 210 vote, it could have been different depending on if everybody showed up and voted. But just as a practical matter, it only would have taken, four people out of that eight to change their mind, and he could have maintained power. I think one of the main reasons that people can point to that this happened when it happened is because the for lack of a better word, the performative theater that Matt Gaetz is engaged in. He and people who think like him or support him or in his wing of the party, they wanted the government to be shut down. They wanted to be able to say we held up business. Our principles are so strong that we held up business. McCarthy ultimately had to resort to working with Democrats, and so that was a bridge too far. Like I think we've talked about that before, that's a extraordinary thing to have happened. He could have relied on that same bailout move, like you said, but he just wasn't. He felt like for some reason the calculation McCarthy made was that, oh well, if I don't work with Democrats again here, it'll show my true allegiance to my team,
Mhm.
rather than needing to go that way. We could talk a little bit more about some of the specifics, but just as it's only 4% of the caucus, these eight
Right.
people. So that means that there's not a whole lot of tweaks that have to be made to get them back, back in the saddle, so to speak, doing what they were doing. But everyone's pointing to the dysfunction and saying, who knows how many weeks this is going to take. Right now, there's a 1 week cooling off period with an interim speaker, Patrick McHenry from North Carolina, and it seems even though there's no succession plan in place now, it seems like they're going to be able to get it sorted out before the 45-day window of when the government shutdown threat reappears.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to be saying about this. Republicans are saying Matt Gaetz was played by Democrats. No, you enabled him. You Republicans enabled him, and they could have shut it down yesterday, or when it happened. They could have shut it down by saying, you know what? We need to restore bipartisanship in this. So here's what we're going to offer the Democrats, because that's how politics works. It's supposed to work. But they've got this Trump albatross around their neck that they've created, I argue, even way before 2016, with the whole Tea Party thing, and really kind of the way the Republican Party has been evolving since 1980. It's the way that they've turned. They are much more ideological than they were back then, and they're governed by this. They've created this situation. McCarthy could have saved himself by saying, this is what I'm going to offer the Democrats, and Republicans. If you don't want to vote with me, fine. And that's and probably could have saved himself, and probably could have been the hero for restoring, so the semblance of bipartisanship that they had in the 1980s when Tip O'Neill, the House Speaker back then, met with Ronald Reagan monthly for lunch. Or dinner or whatever. They met to discuss things. That doesn't happen anymore. It's because you don't want to be perceived as being part of the enemy. Well, the Republicans, okay, well then that's fine, McCarthy. You've done yourself in. Because you are so scared of the Trump faction, and you and the other Republicans, that you don't control your fate anymore. You've handed it over to this small group of extremists. And the Democrats really need to make that point aside. And they're blaming Pelosi for not keeping some sort of deal that McCarthy claims. McCarthy claims that back when they set up the one-person rule, Pelosi promised to back him if he was facing a challenge like this. But probably what was understood is there would be some quid pro quo. That's how politics work. Not, oh yeah, take it or leave it. We're going to continue to cater to this group, but you need to help us, get them under control. No, it's fine. Pelosi wasn't even in Washington, by the way. She was out here for Senator Feinstein's funeral. So or memorial service. Not sure if it was a funeral, but so Again, this is to quote Malcolm X, the chickens have come home to roost, over a more serious incident. But it just, this is what they have done. They have only themselves to blame. And like I said, we're going to come right back within a few weeks to the shutdown crisis, and Republicans, I think they're heading off a ledge.
Yeah, I mean, just in terms of their governance strategy, this kind of approach to obstruction at all costs really started when Speaker Boehner was run out, and so it's the group that became the Freedom Caucus.
Right.
And that group kind of morphed some of its strength, like Wonder Twin powers to a certain extent,
Yeah.
with the Republican Study Committee, with their arguably radical plans for how to downsize government, and so there became like this absolutist, almost not almost a dogmatic approach to governance with no real affirmative plan.
Yeah.
It's not conservative. It's populist and
No, it's
obstructionist and
populist.
destructive. Um, and
And
so,
and let me throw in
yeah,
something there. It goes back to when Bonnier was forced out and when Eric Cantor was primaried by Steve Bannon's sock puppet.
yeah.
And the Republicans have not stood up to this. A few have, and they're out. So, but I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, that's quite right. So I was, Bannon's actually involved now. Bannon's basement. He's got his media program that he's got in place. They're sort of, they're still actively trying to, what I think I called it throughout the last couple of years. It's like it's a team building exercise. They're not governing. They're running a PR campaign, a 24/7 PR campaign. But just to show you how there's a lack of leadership just in general. If you look at those 8 people who did vote against McCarthy, there's a couple of stories in there that I think are worth telling, just because it's real quickly. So Tim Burchett of Tennessee, he approached McCarthy and just said, "Hey, I'm going to pray." And this is all secondhand, like I wasn't there, but this is what I heard. He approached McCarthy and said, I'm not certain what I'm going to do. I just want to pray on it." And McCarthy laughed in his face. And so he said, "Oh, I guess I don't have to pray on it anymore. I already know what I'm going to do." Because he was offended to his face about take it or like or dislike the scenario there. The point is, a leader would not laugh in the face of one of their colleagues. Another one was Nancy Mace, from South Carolina. She's
Yes.
considered very, I mean, I've seen her hit the media, various media outlets. She comes across as thoughtful. She's out there saying, "Hey, look, abortion is sinking our party the way we're doing it. We're gonna have to do something different." She went on the record after the vote as saying, "Hey, I voted against McCarthy because he basically promised me he was going to work towards normalizing our abortion stance, and he didn't. So I want someone in there that's going to do that." Are
Yes.
any of these Republicans going to do that? Probably not. But the point is, like, what calculation was she engaged in, where she thought, "Hey, I'm going to stick with the Matt Gaetz side. I'm going to get McCarthy out of there." She seems like someone who wouldn't. She's not radical, apparently, from what I've seen. So some other thing was happening. Um, in terms of like why, like strange bedfellows kind of situation. But I think in the time we have left, we can look forward a little bit. And the question is, well, what are they going to do? There's a bunch of names that came forward of potential people who might replace him. The party structure is that there's the speaker, and then the majority leader, and then the majority whip. So sort of almost by definition, those are the first 2 people in queue. That's Steve Scalise from Louisiana,
Yeah.
Tom Emmer from Minnesota. Scalise, if people don't remember, he was actually involved in a shooting where he was targeted and he recovered, and there was bipartisan support around that at a softball game, bipartisan support for him. So he's got some degree of comity. He was the whip, so he knows how to work the party. So he seems like obviously next in line, air quotes. But in the line of succession, McCarthy picked Patrick McHenry from the Financial Services Committee. He's the chair, Financial Services Committee from North Carolina. And so those are folks who did negotiate. Patrick McHenry in particular, somebody who did negotiate with the White House to raise the debt ceiling. So again, this all happened so fast, but the idea was that McCarthy already agreed not to have any kind of budget or debt problems until 2025, and
Hmm.
then so suddenly his party sort of radicalized and went against that. But so McHenry, he's in queue just because McCarthy put him there. Jim Jordan, Judiciary Committee chair, right wing agitator. He's the founding chair of the Freedom Caucus. Also, Tom Cole from Oklahoma. He's somebody who's considered the Rules Committee chair, someone who's got experience. I'm going to throw out there a wild card too. Kevin Hern from Oklahoma. He is the chair of the Republican Study Committee and sort of the brains behind, arguably, apparently, a lot of the more extreme budget hawk approach that the
Yeah.
party seems to want to engage in looking forward.
So I mean, the question is who benefits from this. I mean, Gates. They're saying it's putting him in a position to win governor of Florida. That's his next goal. I mean, I would say no way could he be elected, but look who Florida has been electing lately, and overwhelmingly. So I don't know. But that, and I can't even imagine that he would be able to govern at all. But I don't know that DeSantis has really been doing that. So maybe maybe it's structured in Florida so they don't need to do that. But I mean, that's basically the take on this. The Democrats, there's a lot of people out there saying, "Oh, well, at least you had the devil, And it's like it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who's in that office. They're all. It's going to be the same politics.
Because I want to watch this witch hunt myself. I've been going through a witch hunt for years. This is really now getting dirty.
My message is simple. No matter how powerful you are, no matter how much money you think you may have, no one is above the law.
What we have here is an attempt to hurt me in an election.
All right, so we have this fraud trial in New York. I think we talked briefly last week about the fact that the judge has already made a preliminary finding that Trump and his use the term sock puppet again, corporations have committed fraud. There's been a lot of discussions about the property values of Mar-a-Lago and the like, and what it's actually worth, and what Trump claimed it was worth back when he was trying to pay lower taxes on it. But I don't want to get into that again. But so Trump doesn't like the ruling. He has decided to show up and be at this trial since he completely missed the trial where he was basically deemed a rapist by the jury. This is not a jury trial. This is a bench trial. It's a jury does not qualify for the particular causes of action in this. It's being maintained by the Attorney General of New York State. This is again state law. Trump has been attacking the prosecutor for a long time, but now he's come out with a very unique strategy. So he sits in the room, he stares at people, and then he goes outside and bathmouths. And the question I have been raising is the attorneys. I'm just going to quickly bring up Rule 8.2, which is in the ABA code, and is adopted in states, in New York and California, by the way. The rule of ethics. A lawyer shall not make a statement that the lawyer knows to be false or with reckless disregard as to the truth or falsity concerning the qualifications or integrity of a judge, adjudicatory officer or public legal officer, or of a candidate for election or appointment to the judicial or legal office. You are not supposed to slander a judge. You are not supposed to publicly attack them in a way that puts them in false light. There are reasons for this rule. It might seem like that we attorneys our freedom of speech is being impacted. We can criticize judges, but we're not supposed to denigrate them. There's a big difference. We're supposed to say we can say they were wrong. We are not supposed to say that they are corrupt and and incompetent. We're not supposed to say that. So the question is when you are standing there silent next to your client as your client is going out and ranting and saying that he's corrupt, then are they breaching their duty? In my view, yes. I believe that those attorneys should be disciplined. Will it happen? Probably not, because they're not actually saying something, but they should not be there, and they should instruct him. And even we're actually under guidelines that we're supposed to correct information that is made by our clients or anybody associated with us, to correct disinformation about a judge, and they are doing none of that. It's one thing. I'm convinced by now that Trump is mentally ill. He can't control himself. But the attorneys out there, they should not be allowing this to happen. And if he continues to do it, they should not continue to represent him. But they just sit there out there like what he's saying is perfectly fine. This is this is a huge breach, and I really hope that the bar takes action. But I'm not hopeful that they will. Anyways, he also has brought up on his Truth Social media the clerk. The clerk, apparently there's some photograph of her with Senator Chuck Schumer, and he used that as a reason to attack the clerk. Why are you attacking the clerk? There's no reason. All the clerk does is basically put exhibit tabs onto the paperwork that's submitted to her and make sure that the paperwork is going and that the trial is flowing well, kind of the assistant to the judge. That's all she does. She makes no decisions, and there's no reason to attack her, and it's way out of line. The Judge Engoron, if I'm saying that right, has basically he was silent while he was being attacked, but once they attacked his clerk, he became very angry and he issued what they're referring to as a gag order. You cannot talk about my staff, period. End of story. We'll see if Trump abides by that rule. We'll see what happens if he doesn't. It's going to be very interesting. We might learn as to whether or not a former president can actually spend time in jail, or whether or not under contempt he can just have an ankle bracelet and have Secret Service, sit with him in his house. I don't know. He can also be fined, but the judge needs to get control of this. Sounds like the judge tried today. We'll see if it sticks. I don't think that Trump went outside after today and did the same rant. So maybe, at least for now, Trump will behave. But that issue with the clerk was way out of line. And right now, I don't blame the mentally ill person. I blame the lawyers for allowing that to happen.
So interestingly, you and I talked about a while back, is it the case that Trump is going to be able to engage in self-control sufficiently to endure all these charges against him in these various courts, comport himself in a way that's consistent with civility? And he came out at a gate on this one. His strategy, as much as it is his tactic, rather, I guess, was to actually go out and, during, like you said, during the breaks. Sometimes he didn't even make it to the steps. He was actually in the courthouse. Saying that, look, this corrupt judge, this is his words, judge was put in place to get him, that the judge should be impeached, that the same story as if it was like one of his rallies, the witch hunt. He named other people not even on this case, and then he went back to this case. They actually had to delay the lunch, coming back from lunch, because he was ranting and raving for so long during the recess. He said, this is a rogue judge whose clerk is in charge of the case. And he was actually saying, look, this court is disgraceful. This case should be dismissed. So he's undermining the integrity of the court here, which I think, which is bad enough.
It's dangerous. It's dangerous.
He's going to violate the order probably. And then when the first punishments start coming down, he's going to start appealing, probably thinking that the Supreme Court's going to have his back. But when the safety of the staff of the court is really in jeopardy, no appellate court and no Supreme Court is going to say that this is acceptable. In fact, I have a quote from the judge. Personal attacks of any member of my court staff are unacceptable, inappropriate. I will not tolerate them. Consider this statement an order forbidding all parties from posting, emailing, or speaking publicly about any members of my staff. Failure to obey will result, in swift and meaningful sanctions.
Yes.
So the idea is like laying down the law. and that includes house arrest, that includes incarceration. I did
Mhm.
hear some experts say that he's getting special treatment here.
Oh yeah.
If you and I
Yeah.
went out after our court and did a court date and did a press release calling for the whole system to be dismissed, left, right, center, the way he is, we'd
Yeah.
probably get a contempt of court. We'd probably have to spend the night in jail, or just so that the court can kind of flex and say, look, this is not we're not going to tolerate this. So this is actually a stress test of our institutions, and I think it's going to ramp up. It's
Absolutely.
going to get worse before it gets better. He's looking for the boundaries, and we do have guardrails in our system, but this is a slowly caged, for lack of a better word, animal, slowly caged animal. And they're going to fight back, and the way he knows to fight back is to lash out. He's gotten away with it this long, and we'll see. It doesn't seem reasonable to expect that it's going to end well.
Years ago, I was approached by a progressive group locally to run for judge. Locally, when a place became open, ultimately I decided not to do it. And one of the reasons I decided not to do it is I spoke to a judge who said, I understand your feelings as you expressed on your radio show. Apparently, judges watch and listen to these things, but said, but if you do happen to get elected judge, you really need to consider purchasing a gun and learning how to use it. Because you are going to get death threats. You are going to have, people threatening your family. You are going to, face a lot of things. We've seen judges who were killed and shot at, sometimes in their homes, as it happened a couple of years ago with the one woman who lost her husband and son, I believe. I'm forgetting her name.
Yeah.
And in here in California, in San Francisco, we now have a, um, a metal detector to get into the courthouse in San Francisco, and then you have to go through a second metal detector to get into the family law department. Not the criminal, by the way. In criminal, they tend to be well behaved, but family law, somebody opened up on a judge, somebody who wasn't happy with a custody ruling years back, and luckily the judge avoided harm. But it is a dangerous thing, and these are the people who have decided to take it upon themselves to implement justice. I mean, I'm an anti-authoritarian kind of guy. I don't say lightly that people, that attorneys or anybody shouldn't be allowed to say what you're thinking. But this is a dangerous situation. This judge is probably getting death threats and just not reporting them. I am grateful that Democrats and Republicans outside of this process are holding back from making statements. They probably needed to do so from the beginning. I think thought it was extremely irresponsible and dangerous for for any of the Republicans to say this is the weaponization of the Department of Justice. That was profoundly irresponsible, and McCarthy himself said it. So it's so when you're doing this, let the judge do their job, and if you don't like the decision, you appeal. That's how it works. And you can criticize them in terms of their law, but you do not get to go outside, and especially you don't get to dox a clerk. You don't get to punch down. You don't get to bring people in who are just doing their jobs and don't get paid all that much to do it. They've got some nice benefits, but it ain't worth this. Again, I do think that Republicans should be stepping up and saying that's inappropriate. You do not undermine the judicial system that way, and you do not put this judge or other judges into danger because of this. That's my view, and certainly his attorneys need to get a leash on him. I would fire a client who did that, who went on record calling a judge corrupt. I would say, no, I'm sorry, you have to find somebody else. Of course, if I was a public defender, I wouldn't have choices, but of it, I'm stuck with the person. But I would simply not represent somebody who is going to denigrate a judge that way. You have to have respect for the position, even if you don't have respect for the individual.
Yeah, I mean the idea that the former president is out there like doxing people or encouraging folks to first of all, it's slander or libel to say that a photo indicates a relationship. That's you can't jump to logic just because two people are in the same photo. We're talking about a senator. The senator takes so many photos with so many people. Uh, Chances are that this is just completely fabricated. But more than that, it's really stochastic terrorism, which is a fancy word for inciting violence from the mob. In effect, you're encouraging people to go out and engage in extra legal actions, which is like a lynching or some other mob rule. It's a breakdown in the order
Yeah.
of society. So we're really close to that point where it's more obvious to more people that that's the road. That's the defense, or maybe you could call it an offensive move, because Trump, the defendant, he's got such a weak sort of scenario, a bleak scenario behind him. It's going to get worse before it gets better. I wish that weren't true, but I think that that's what it's going to take for people to see where this is headed.
And these are obviously attorneys, I'm sorry, who just want to take the paycheck. They don't think they're going to win this case. They certainly aren't taking any steps to control their client or to act in his best interest. I mean, there is no legal strategy where you get to badmouth the judge and that's going to work out well for you. It's not going to happen. It's not going to make the appellate court, even some of his own appointees, want to rule in his favor, because they're going to look like they're caving to that pressure. I don't think he's going to get any help from the Supreme Court on this one, unless there is an egregious breach of the law. But the judge's finding that they'll probably appeal of fraud, that's an evidentiary ruling, and the trial court, you can only overturn an evidentiary ruling if you on the basis of that there was an abuse of discretion, that the judge just absolutely had no business making that decision. Appellate courts are not supposed to supplant their opinions of the evidence with the other. If he made an error in ruling of law as to how he came to the conclusion, that's one thing. So they're stuck. I think everybody's thinking, oh well, hopefully there'll be some Trump and Bush appointed judges in the circuit court that will overturn this guy. Don't count on it. This is going to be the case that leads to the deep state, and this is just the beginning. I mean, he's got several more trials over the next year. He's calling it election interference. Apparently Fox News is playing some 15-year-old, or pardon me, some 8-year-old from 2015 video of the judge joking about Trump in a classroom or something, and they're deciding that makes them too biased. I mean, I'll let you close it out. I'm disgusted with the attorneys.
Yeah, just one quick sentence here that in addition to the ranting and the raving, he's a leaky bucket who's doing himself a disservice, because he actually came out and implicated himself in the actual crime by saying, oh, well, it said right on my tax returns that you need to do your own homework and look up these values. This is self-reported, but it might not be accurate. And saying that doesn't make it so. So it's not just that he's out there, in stochastic terrorism mode. He's actually undermining his own defense. So
absolutely,
it's malpractice to kind of put him out there in front of the cameras and even have him in the courtroom at all. He's doing himself a disservice.
If the senator designate will now present herself at the desk, the chair will administer the oath of office. Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. Do you solemnly swear that you will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that you will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, that you take this obligation freely, without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and that you will well and faithfully discharge the duties of the office upon which you are about to enter, so help you God?
I will.
Congratulations. Congratulations.
Last topic. This takes us back to California. We've been talking about how Gavin Newsom, the governor, has been under a lot of pressure to appoint a black woman because he did not appoint a black woman to replace Kamala Harris when she left. He kind of made the promise. And people will say, oh, this is something Democrats do. I'll just point out real quickly that Ronald Reagan, when he made a reversal on the Equal Rights Amendment and women were starting to turn against him, he made the promise that he would appoint a woman to the Supreme Court the first chance he got. And of course he did. That was Sandra Day O'Connor. So this is not something that is unique to Democrats or liberalism, but it is something that that he had to do. In the meantime, we even before Dianne Feinstein, and I've had a lot of things I have said about her negatively. I do want to take a moment to say that she was a statesperson. She came in a very difficult situation after a double assassination in San Francisco, and she did manage to maintain and restore things to a sense of normalcy. She's been in public service for decades. I'll say that, I've got a lot of criticisms of her, including her stubborn behavior that led to this situation. But anyway, she has passed away, and Gavin Newsom, realizing that there needs to be a replacement right away, appointed somebody who was under pressure to appoint Barbara Lee, who is of the three major candidates, the only one who is African American. He said he didn't want to put his thumb on the scale of that election. He's also, running against Katie Porter and Adam Schiff. Adam Schiff is, I believe, the party favorite, and so he did not want to buck them. So he appointed activists, Emily's List President LaFonza Butler, who does have California ties. She was not a resident of California at the time. She's going to have to re-register. That's a little bit of a controversy right there, but she has been sworn in. I was very curious to see how Barbara Lee would respond, and Barbara Lee, I think, has just decided to take it and move on. Says, I wish LaFonza well, and I look forward to working closely with her to deliver for the Golden State. She wrote in a post on X. And I am singularly focused on winning my campaign for Senate. California deserves an experienced senator who will deliver on progressive priorities. That's exactly what I'm running to do. Ro Khanna, who is Barbara Lee's supporter, I think he's isn't he the campaign manager for her? I'm not sure, but he's in a position in her campaign and has spoke for her campaign, said that he was disappointed. But this makes Butler the only black woman currently in the Senate and the first out black lesbian in Congress anytime, anywhere. So very interesting situation. Gavin Newsom has said, of course, that she can legally run if she wants to. That could really complicate the race. And in fact, I've been trying to think since I became aware of this as to who that would affect most. I actually think if she decided to run, it could actually hurt Adam Schiff. But that's neither here nor there. She is in there. Probably definitely more moderate than Barbara Lee, and so the question is, will Gavin Newsom take any flack for it? So far, not too much. But Barbara Lee had previously said, "Oh, it's insulting to bring in a black woman just to be a caretaker position for a few months." But she's not repeating that and is going on with the campaign. So. A lot of politics in there. The Republicans have pledged that they're not going to block a replacement on the Senate Judiciary Committee, which means that they may be able to get somebody in there and continue appointing judges for the rest of the term in case this is Biden's last year. We don't know, or actually next year would be his last year, but still. Anyway, Dave.
Yeah, so thank you for that setup. I think now Senator LaFonza Butler, sworn in yesterday by Vice President Kamala Harris. Those
Yes.
were two of only three black women ever in the U.S. Senate in that one camera shot there. So it is a big
Actually,
deal.
Carrie Mosley Brown was senator in Illinois, so she would be the third.
Yeah, there you go. That's the third. Thank you.
Carrie Mosley.
So a couple things about Senator Butler. A few are credential related, and then a few are controversy related, just because of course, why not? I mean, that's the nature of the beast. So she was a senior advisor on Kamala Harris's 2020 presidential campaign, a member of the University of California Board of Regents, 20 years in the labor movement, including as president of SEIU, 215 Home Healthcare Workers Union in California. Currently president of the abortion rights fundraising group, Emily's List. So people have said, and then of course, like we said, third black woman and first black lesbian to openly serve in the U.S. Senate. I looked it up. There are currently 13 members of Congress who are out, who identify as lesbian, gay, or bisexual. It was interesting. Pew called it LGB. I guess that they limited their research to those categories. But so they charted it over time. We're at the highest amount, the most representation, which is great. All things, this is a positive, a high note here. So the LGBTQ plus Victory Institute praised her appointment, calling it, quote, saying it shatters the rainbow ceiling and signifies a big step forward in our push for a more representative government. About 5%, so 1 in 20 Californians self-identify as LGBT. So it is, it's important for our state. Also, the executive director, Tony Huang of LGBTQ group called Equality California, he said, quote, another voice in Congress at a time when our rights and freedoms are under attack across the country. So it's well received, but there's some criticisms out there. So the first one I would say is that she is, LaFonza Butler is a partner in SCRB Strategies, Gavin Newsom's political consultancy firm.
Yeah, definitely an ally of his.
Yeah, so there it's a tight group, and a lot of times you say, where you stand depends on where you sit. Well, one of her most recent jobs that she did, assignments, clients, were advising Airbnb and Uber, dealing with organized labor on employment matters. And if you read between the lines, it's actually like she represented Uber trying to broker a deal. This is from Cal Matters. Alexei Koseff said, organized labor is likely to split on supporting Butler. People felt betrayed when she represented Uber. She tried to help them broker a deal that would avoid avoid classifying their drivers as employees. So,
which is ironic because she used to be a union organizer for SEIU, right. So it's a little bit ironic.
Yeah. And then the other thing, which you already mentioned, was the fact that she's actually living in Maryland for the last few years, right. And but she maintains a home here in California. I think that's a little bit of a stretch to say that there's anything nefarious about that. There's lots of people with lots of money who have houses in multiple states, or they put down roots in a state where they want to get involved in politics.
Yeah, it's not like she doesn't have roots here. She was on the University of California Board of Regents. She's spent most of her life here. It's not like she's just a complete stranger being called in that doesn't understand California politics. She does.
So I think there's we can explore this a little bit. The idea that Gavin said, firstly, he said he wasn't going to appoint somebody who's running for office because he didn't want to interfere. He said that a few weeks ago. And then when he did make this appointment, now he's out saying that this is an interim appointment. But he also said that if the new senator wants to run, she's eligible to run too. Yeah. So she has to, come up with that plan. In fact, she's already going to have to run. This is the thing that not everybody quite understands. Similar to what happened for Senator Padilla's seat, he had to run for the interim period and for the next cycle at the same time. And we're not having a special election. It doesn't appear to be the case. So it's going to be timed. The primary will be on the primary and the general will be on the general. Even though there's only 15 weeks left in Feinstein's term, if Butler does decide to run for the next term, she'll be running for 2 competitions at the exact same time. That vote won't get counted until November. So
Right.
really, it'll just be for like December and January. So it'll be like a 5-week period. So it's kind of counterintuitive, but that's actually the case.
My guess is probably that the others simply won't run on that platform. They'll just let her have that one clear. So if she doesn't run, if she decides to run for the long term, all bets are off. They'll probably run in both. So we'll see.
And then there's just the question here of, like you said, what would be the impact? So people are saying that because it's a nonpartisan election, if this could split the Democrats sufficiently that it allows a Republican to get a little bit more votes than they would have otherwise, comparatively speaking. Even though 2 out of 3 voters are Democratic, if the other person can't break the 30% mark or something like that, if the other 4 gets split up, it could hurt the like right now I think Schiff is leading, and then Porter is second, and then Barbara Lee's third. If Butler were to run, not to say that there's any similarity in their portfolios, but we've got progressives in Barbara Lee and Porter, and we've got a moderate in apparently a moderate with progressive roots.
Moderate by California standards.
Yeah, but in Butler, and then Schiff is even more moderate. So the question is where's the taking the pulse of the state? Where's the popularity going to come down here? It's contentious, and I'm actually I don't know if you are, but we're both elected delegates, and the convention is coming up in November.
It'll be interesting.
Yeah, I think we're going to go vote. We're going to go meet all 3 of them, and arguably we're going to go meet all 4 of them. So we'll see how it goes, but it's going to be very competitive.
Yeah, I haven't seen a whole lot of comments from people out of the state yet, other than a few from some of the more right-wing Republicans saying this is a woke appointment kind of a thing, blah blah blah, and the whole the carpetbagging accusation, which, as you pointed out, is ridiculous. But it's it's probably she's probably going to be effective in there, and running Emily's List, which by the way is the biggest financial support system for women who run for office. They've been around for quite a while. Originally formed to protect abortion rights, but then more broadly to encourage women in power. And so in supporting a lot of these campaigns, she's also been part of the strategy. If she does run, she'll be a formidable opponent to all of her people.
Absolutely. Sorry.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
I was going to say, I'm glad you brought this up because I had to look it up. I obviously have heard of Emily's List, but I didn't really know that much about them. And I was thinking, well, what benefit does this add to her network? I was thinking of her network of people around the country. But in fact, so Emily's List stands for Early Money is Like Yeast, which I didn't know. But it's like, if you give money to somebody, you're baking bread here. It's going to leaven and grow, and this is going to be a candidate's going to be more likely to succeed. So I looked up like how much money are we talking about, and according to OpenSecrets.com, in the last election cycle, they donated almost $4.5 million to key candidates in key congressional, Senate, House races. And they also gave another 3.4 million, almost 3.5, to a super PAC called Women Vote. So that means that she's personally had her influence on $8 million in spending. And they've already gone ahead and supported 18 candidates in important swing states to control the House in this upcoming election. So she's already got her, wrapped her influence and funding around a dozen and a half, at least, congressional races around the country. So formidable in terms of resources, but also reach and influence.
Yeah. I found also that poll that you referred to, and you're right. Adam Schiff is ahead in the latest poll, and there've only been, I think, 2 polls, which boggles the mind. You'd think they'd be wanting to watch this, and I think there'll be a lot more now. But Schiff had 20%. He's in first, right? Porter followed with 17%. Barbara Lee with 7%. That's a lot of undecideds there. A lot of people that don't know, who they are or know and don't know. Adam Schiff might have a few negatives, that he's got to worry about. But Barbara Lee needs to get her name known. And this is going to be interesting to see how she does it. Like I said, they're just getting started, though. We'll see. That's a lot of room to fill in.
Eeny, meeny, chili, beany, the spirits are about to speak.
Are they friendly spirits?
Friendly? Just listen.
This brings us to our predictions. Dave, what do you have for us?
I'm going to try to be short and sweet. This has to do with a topic we covered today in this show, and it has to do with the Speaker of the House. What's going to happen next? So in the wake of the recent chaotic removal of House Speaker Kevin McCarthy, it's clear to everybody that the Republican majority needs to regroup, refocus, and come up with a new speaker who can get their caucus together to rally behind 218 votes. Despite calls for a wild card candidate like former President Donald Trump, which we're seeing quite a bit, the next leader of Congress is much more likely to become someone that satisfies the interests of the entire party, including this rebel caucus, as they're being called. So with that in mind, I predict we will see the safe bet Majority Leader Steve Scalise, who was number 2 under Speaker McCarthy, who currently has broad support, including from Matt Gaetz and the others who just brought down McCarthy.
I wonder how many votes it'll take, but I agree. Well, I'm going to make a prediction that's related to that. I am going to predict that it's inevitable that there will be, after this 45-day period elapses, a shutdown in government. How long it will last, I don't know. As I discussed earlier in the show, I think that the Democrats have framed it, and the Republicans themselves have mistakenly framed it in a way that it's going to be seen as the Republicans' game, that they shut down the government. Will people really care about that? The impact of shutdowns of government doesn't happen right away, but it will be used against the Republicans later, and it'll be used to show their dysfunction in a lot of the close races, and I think that it will, a lot of the swing races, and I think it will have an impact on those. But I am saying that the Republicans because for all the reasons we've discussed, they can't help themselves. They are going to shut down the government. We'll see for how long. Well, if any of these things happen or don't happen, we'll be talking about it later. But until next time, stay informed and stay engaged.